Hi friends, my name is Mackenzie, also known as Emtothethird, and this is the Emtothethird Knitting Podcast. Do I know what episode? No. But it will be in the title and everything. So my name is Mackenzie. I'm a queer fat knitter primarily, but also natural dyer and illustrator, and I have a business called Emtothethird Yarn Co., which I will leave a link for down below. One of the first little announcements that I wanted to make for all of my Pacific Northwest folks is that I will be, once again, bringing my yarns to Starlight Knitting Society for the yarn crawl that is happening at the end of this month. There's a link down below for more info if you plan to visit, whether you're traveling in or local. It's really fun. I'd highly recommend making the trek. And there is also an online component. So there are some things that are listed online. So for more information about that, go to the individual shops, and again, I will post a link down below. My intention is to upload a video that has like a preview of some of the things that I'm going to be bringing. We'll see, because it always gets very chaotic leading up to the event, and there's a lot of work that I still have to do. So that is my intention, even if it's like kind of a rough cut video. I'm hoping to get some sort of preview. However, you can also follow me on Instagram, where I'm posting updates there as well. All of that info is down below. And yeah, just in case you are interested and local and want to check it out. The second bit of news that I have is that I am starting to do live streams on Tuesday here on YouTube. It has been so fun. We've done it 2 weeks in a row so far. It's gonna range from like 4 p.m. Pacific time to 5 p.m. like start times. Just depending on what's going on for the week. So it may start at 4, it may start at 5, but I'm trying to upload it, basically like the preview of it, on Monday, so that you have a little bit of time. But yeah, it's just a nice thing to hang out, and then they are uploaded onto my channel, so you can go back and watch them. But if you hang out, then you can chat and kind of engage with everyone, and yeah, that's been pretty fun. So yeah, that's something that I'm starting this year that I'm really excited about. And then last but not least, in terms of news, is that as a lot of you know, I have had a Slack channel for this podcast, and it has been really amazing. We do virtual knit nights. We did it all through the pandemic, and it's just a really nice place to like ask for advice, post FO pictures, and like a way to build community that is separate from Instagram, which can sometimes not be great for kind of forming that kind of community. So I started that Slack channel a while ago, and it has been serving its purpose very well. However, Slack itself as a platform has made some changes to its free accounts that is making it, basically it felt like it was making it impossible to keep using it. Previously, just I'm kind of getting into the minutia of it a little bit, just to explain why. Like, I'd been thinking about it a while. I kind of asked folks in the Slack group briefly what their thoughts were on leaving Slack for another platform. There's obviously pros and cons to that decision. So I just kind of wanted to lay it out so that if you're like feeling some way about it, that you understand that it wasn't just like I'm just like switching gears all of a sudden. But so one of the things that I have personally loved about Slack is that I'll remember that someone recommended a pattern or a technique or even like a recipe, because we talk about food on there, a book, a TV show, and I can basically type into the search function on Slack and it will pull up what I'm thinking about. However, with the changes that they made, they previously would keep a log of 10,000 messages, both direct messages and public messages. And so you could search for 10,000 messages, which for my purposes and the purposes of the Slack group was excellent. However, within the last, I think it must have been 6 months or so, they've changed it so that they only save 3 months of the chat backlogs, which has been very annoying. And it feels like an intentional way to get groups that are using it for free off of their platform. So to basically access that, you'd have to pay for it, which is like on other platforms, each individual user will pay a monthly fee to have access to the advanced features, which I think would make a lot of sense in this case. But for Slack specifically, because it is for organizations and made for businesses, the only option to pay for it is for the host, basically, of or the owner, I guess, of the space. And so that would be on me, which, you know, if it was a reasonable price, I'd be happy to do, but it's almost $10 per user. So we have, like, you know, on and off about 150 users, and that's just like an absurd amount of money. So, needless to say, it felt like it was time to make a change, and I know some people already have podcast communities on Discord, and so that just felt like the right option for where we were at. And there are parts of Discord that I don't like, which is why I went with Slack from the beginning, but all of this is to say that the Slack channel has moved from Slack to Discord. There will always be a link to sign up down below, and I also did think about starting the Discord to be a pay to be part of it. However, I have always said that the Slack will be free, and I think that makes the most sense for the kind of community that I'm trying to foster, and just to be as welcoming and as accessible as possible. So it will continue to be a free space to join, and that is the intention for right now. Yeah, it's a really great community. So if you're enjoying this podcast and my vibe, I think that it's safe to say that the Discord is another place where you can meet like-minded people and build some knitting community online, which is pretty cool. We do also have coming up this week, or this month rather, a virtual knit night on Discord. So if that's something else that you're interested in, definitely check it out. And yeah, that's all that's going on. So thank you for letting me blather about that. I just feel like it's important to kind of describe that decision, because I know it's not, I would prefer for Slack to not have made these changes and to stay there, but it is what it is. And yeah. I've got a lot of whips to go over today. I have no finished objects. Well, hold on. The only thing that I have finished so far this year was a muscle burr hat, which I knit for Starlight as a sample. So I don't have that with me, but it was a really fun make. I used some yarn from Mitchell's Creations, which, if you don't know Mitchell's, they do this like really cool unicorn yarn where it's like mostly a solid color, and there's like every range, and then there's these big patches of like rainbow. And so I knit it in the muscle burr, and it just happened so wonderfully that the rainbow pooled in this really cool way. So I have a picture of that, so I will at least include that in here. But other than that, I have just been knitting and casting on like a mad woman, which, if you know me, is not usually my MO. There's nothing wrong with that. But for some reason I'm just like in this frenzy right now, and I have a lot of whips. I did think a lot about what I was going to work on moving into 2023. As a lot of you know, I knit 12 pairs of socks last year, and I pretty thoroughly documented that process and reasoning. If you would like to know more about that, you can head to my 2022 roundup video. I'll post a link up whichever corner so that you can take a look at that. But so I wanted to talk a little bit about my intentions for 2023 and right. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, one of the biggest things that I was feeling last year, I think especially because this is the third time that I have done a 12 pairs of socks over 12 months, is that I was not feeling very challenged with my knitting. I've realized over the years that one of my favorite things to do is to knit it. Okay, so two of my favorite things in knitting. One is doing color work. I really love stranded color work. That's like always what I am drawn towards and what I work with. Not a big texture person. Just at this moment, that's not what I gravitate towards. I really admire it in other people, but that's just not really been my vibe. The second thing is that I really love wearing pretty simple garments. I finished last year my Stockbridge by Isolde Teague, which is just a crew neck cardigan in like a fingering or sport weight somewhere in there. And it's like one of my most worn items. Was it a ton of fun to knit? Not particularly. But so that sort of creates this like almost conundrum, because what I want to be wearing is not very fun to knit, and what I like to knit is not always very challenging. And so I was just kind of recognizing that I was not feeling super inspired to work on my projects. And I was like, okay, how do I challenge myself in the coming year? And something that I have wanted to do for a long time is to follow Elizabeth Zimmerman's Knitter's Almanac, which is a book. If you don't know who Elizabeth Zimmerman is, she was writing books and newsletters for people that explained how to do sweaters in a way that she called like unventing knitting techniques. So she is really one of the pioneers of like a top-down sweater, where you're not seaming things and it's all in one piece, and sort of the proportions of that, so that you can take whatever yarn you have and make a sweater pattern like that. To do like a raglan based on any yarn that you had, and etc. So I've thought about this a lot. And so I spent some time with the book like in December, and at the beginning of January, thinking about how it would go if I attempted to do it. And immediately I was sort of like, the first project is an Aran sweater, and she provides a chart for the cables. And again, I'm at this point where I don't like, where I'm just not drawn to texture. And so I was immediately like, and this is what I've always come up against. And so I was like, okay, well, what if I kind of take the ethos of this and do my own almanac that I could like provide patterns in the same spirit as Elizabeth Zimmerman and do that. So that's really how I hit the ground running, was like thinking in that kind of way and like wondering how I could like write something, because so anyway, it sort of turned into this like much bigger project than I initially thought that it would be. And I was like working on it and kind of like getting feedback on it, and I was like, you know what, I'm putting too much pressure on myself. I love the idea. I could like see it turning into this bigger project, but I think I need to, before I attempt to do this, I really wanted to solidify just knitting patterns that I not like come up with, but use resources to kind of make in my size and experiment. So that's where I'm at. That could be a project for later on. I am still kind of working on stuff, but I need to relieve some of the pressure, because sometimes I put a lot on myself and then I don't enjoy my craft. So what I am working on right now, I'm really enjoying, and I'm excited to share those 2 projects with you. So the first one is my favorite yoke construction, which is a combination of a circular yoke and a raglan. I first knit a sweater like that. It was like one of the first sweaters that I knit and wore all the time. And it is as old as Chickadee, but I modified the color work pattern to be little scissors. And ever since then I've been like, damn, this is the yoke for me. And so I've kind of worked with Elizabeth Zimmerman's percentage system and like tweaked it, and I've made a few sweaters following that construction. And so I was trying to like fine tune it for my own purposes and really think about it. And yeah, I ended up with this really great sweater that I'm still, of course, working on, because now that I have done all of that shaping, it's just going very, very slow, because it's all just knitting and fingering weight. And you'll see that there's a couple of letters up here, and that is because I charted out a whole thing that I'm going to duplicate stitch, but I started it a little too high, so I need to take these out and move it down to the second row of increases, or in between the second and third increases. But this is what it is. Let me try it on real quick. The yarn is one of my favorites that I've talked about quite a lot, and it is Urso Yarn Co.'s BFL. I don't have any of the tags, of course, in a holiday colorway of theirs called Twinkle Lights. So yeah, it fits really nicely. I am a little apprehensive that perhaps I could have done some more raglan shaping to bring the armhole down, because it's like pretty high up, but I won't know until I actually do the sleeves. But yeah, so making this longer, and then up here I will pick up stitches and add maybe like an inch of ribbing just to finish up the top. But I'm pretty happy with how it's looking. I've done helical knitting because the skeins were like just slightly different, just to make them blend a little bit better. I have a tutorial on that I will post up there if you are wondering what I'm talking about. But yeah, so that's the first project, and it was really fun to kind of figure out. I'm excited to add the lettering to it, and then I'll have more to say about it at that point. But it's going to say across the top sin vergüenza, which I'm very excited about. It is like a Spanish phrase that means like no shame, like without shame, shameless. And it's something that like we almost use, that is used as derogatorily, like as an insult, but my family has always used as like a term of endearment. because my grandma is extremely sinvergüenza. And so we've always used it. And I think as a queer person in Latino culture, the phrase feels also like a term of endearment. So I thought it'd be funny, and I feel very validated that when I told my grandma that I'm making a sweater with sinvergüenza across the front, she was like just cackled and thought it was hilarious. So I'm in good company, but I'll keep you updated on this progress. And yeah, so that's the first one. The second, like, self-drafted project is a little more involved. So there's a pattern by Pickles, which is a Scandinavian, Norwegian yarn store, I believe, who has this amazing pattern that has this like diamond checkered motif. I will post it here. I've admired it for a long time, and in fact during the pandemic bought yarn with the intention to use it to knit the pattern. My colors were like not quite right, and then once I got into the pattern I realized that it's not quite my size, and because of the all over color work and because it's a raglan, I just like was a little too intimidated to try it, in addition to working on moving across the country. And so I just didn't feel like I had the brain space to tackle it at that time. So I did a little swatch that's like mimicking the pattern but using quite different yarn. And I followed just like a very basic how to knit a raglan tutorial and knit kind of what I would consider a first draft. And through that first draft kind of realized ways that I could tweak it to make it better. Ended up pulling that out and starting a second time. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that process and describe why I made the decisions that I did. So this is what it looks like. It's a pretty subtle, it looks subtle in some parts and a lot in others. So this was my initial swatch using these two colors, as well as, you can't totally see, but an orange color that matches the contrast yarn. But the contrast yarn is actually a big ol' skein of many, a big ol' ball that is made up of a bunch of skeins of spin cycle. So of course this is not representative of what the ball or what the patterning is going to look like. So I started with this kind of like mauve-y, purpley, I don't know if that color is showing up. Yeah, there you go. And then moved into this like brown color. It's like natural sheep brown color. And then into more colors. But as the spin cycle yarn started to fade, I was like, ooh, this is like getting to be a lot. In addition, just some of the ways that I was knitting were not working out with the color work tension. So something that this made me kind of reflect on is the fact that if I knit something and finish it and I don't like it, I'm actually very comfortable like undoing it and reusing the yarn for something. However, when I am actively knitting on something that I'm pretty sure I'm going to rip out because it's like the beginning of a sample, the beginning of, you know, just experimentation, I have a much harder time motivating myself to keep going, even though I know that I'm learning from the process. So I've just been reflecting on that, and I think what it's made me realize is I am absolutely a product knitter, which I think also plays into what I was talking about earlier about like a very boring knit that I wear a lot. And like, I'm happy about that, okay? It means I get a lot of FOs, and I think I need to challenge that a little bit. So that's just some of the reflections I've had while working on this project. So I recast it on. I decided to just use one color as the main color and then use the spin cycle as a contrasting color. And also I changed up the stitch count for the two front sides because I wanted the pattern to like increase in a nice way, and basically like develop at a nice speed. There are still some things that I could have done differently, but I'm happy and comfortable with where it's at right now. So this is what it is looking like. Oh my god, my yarn is like 3 balls of yarn attached. So it's a top-down raglan. It's a very, very difficult to see. And this is what the patterning looks like so far. So we've got the two like raglan, I guess, seams, if you will, that I am doing in the spin cycle. And that is largely because in the first one, I did it in the main color, but the floats and the way that they were carrying across those raglan stitches was too tight and just changed the fabric in a way that I didn't like. So I went back and forth for a while so that the front would drop and not be uncomfortable. It looks very small right now, but I think it's just because it's on my needles in the way that it is. I've also already picked up the neck line and begun knitting some ribbing in a contrast color, and that's just because I wanted to make sure I could get it to a point where it was not rolling as much as initially it was. So that's kind of where we're at. If you've been on the live streams the last couple of weeks, you've definitely heard me talk about it. So we'll see once I'm like at the point where the raglan is supposed to end and I have enough stitches to begin, you know, to separate for the arm and body. We'll see where we're at. The thing with raglans is that they like evenly taper out, and that just doesn't work for everyone's body. If you have broader shoulders, if you are bigger, sometimes like just the way that it tapers doesn't quite work. So we'll see when it gets there. The other option, if this doesn't work and I have to rip this whole thing out, which I'm trying not to worry about too much, it's fine, is that you can do kind of an S curve raglan. What that means is that there's more increase, like, so if you're going top down, there's more increases that happen right here so that it more nicely sort of goes over your shoulder, and then it goes down with increases that are more spread out, and then those increases again increase down here so that just the way that it drapes on your body works a little bit better. That I wanted to try the sort of traditional raglan method, and then if it doesn't work, then I will transition to the S. And I think in general, future raglans that I work on, I want to incorporate that S shape. I'm using as a reference Maggie Righetti's book, Knitting, Design, and Plain English. It's a great resource. It's a little outdated, but yeah, it's pretty good. Shout out to Kyla, my coworker, who told me that in the book she says that 2x2 rib is masculine. It's a masculine knitting pattern, like texture, whatever. I can't stop thinking about that. So yeah, those are the two sort of like sweaters that I've been working on. It's been pretty fun. If you have any questions, this is something that I'm like really enjoying being nerdy about, thinking about sweater construction. And so if there's any specific type of sweater construction that you're curious about, let me know. Yeah, and if you've ever, I'd also love to hear different ways that you challenge yourself in your craft, whether it's knitting or something else. Yeah, because it's just something I've been thinking about a lot so far this year and enjoying kind of challenging myself and getting into. So like I said, I've been having like a little bit of a cast on craze. Okay. All right. And that's not something that I typically do, which I don't know, it's just happening right now. I did spend the first couple of days of the new year going through my stash and listing it on Ravelry. It kind of made me feel good because I've worked at yarn stores for like 10 years. It is very easy to just, you know, take something home, add it, you know, etc., etc. And it really felt like I have a manageable stash. And that's not to portray myself as more virtuous or anything, like, please. But just in terms of like what I have in my house and space and whatnot, I was like, okay, all right, like we can handle this. That I picked stash yarn for both of those sweater projects, which felt really good and also just like exciting to be able to look at my stash and kind of like feel inspired by it and not overwhelmed. So yeah, that's been really nice. And all of the projects that I've been working on are things that were in my stash. So the first couple that are my most recent cast-ons, one I cast on yesterday and one I cast on a few days before that, are muscle burr hats, which is an Isolde Teague pattern. I'm sure you've heard of it. If not, it basically starts at the top of the hat and goes out, and then you knit this big like pill, you know, big tube, and then do decreases. So all of the ends are kind of like on the inside and you never see the purl side because you flip it in on itself and it becomes a little hat. So I don't have any finished ones at the moment, but when I do finish them, I will show you, and if you can't visualize it, no worries. So this first one is like bright crazy. It's totally blowing out on camera. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna show up. Yellow hat, and it actually, even though you can't tell, it has reflective thread in it. As you guys know, I have been on this like reflective kick because our neighborhood is so dark and we walk the dog at night, and literally last night I almost hit someone turning from a main street into our neighborhood because they were wearing a black coat in the crosswalk. It's very stressful, but it further invigorated me to make sure that we are at least visible when we're walking the dog at night. I have a headband made out of this same yarn. It's very reflective. I'm making Kay this muscle burr, and halfway down I'm going to switch colors to probably a blue so that they have two colors of hats that they can wear. But yeah, I just cast this on and I'm working on it. So yeah, that's one of them. It should go pretty quick. This yarn is pretty bulky. Lion Brand calls it worsted. It's not worsted. It's chunkier than worsted for sure. It's also 100% acrylic, and then it's sort of plied with the reflective thread. This is discontinued from Lion Brand, but let me see if it'll focus so you can see how it's twisted around there. Yeah. It's their basic stitch line, and I bought, even though it's discontinued, I bought like a 6-pack of all the colors off of Amazon. If you are interested, I will leave a link down below, because I do think it's a pretty cool concept, and I've just been very like worried because it's just so dark and people just aren't careful enough, and so I'm just trying to make sure we're all safe. I guess this is your 30s worried about safety. I started wearing a headlamp while I'm walking the dog so that people can actually, you know, just like be aware that I'm there. It's a lot. The second muscle burr that I cast on is in this hand spun that I made a while ago. I think it was out of some Hello yarn. It was like basically a kit that had one little strand in one color and one in the other, and then I just applied them together. So I cast this one on, and I actually deemed it Kay's project. So I left it next to their spot on the couch, and I was like, here, while we're watching TV, you can knit on this. And you know what? Last night they were. So it's pretty cute. Yeah, I think it'll take the time that it takes, but it'll be a nice addition to our like little hat pile. I did make this in my size because my head is quite a bit bigger than Kay's. So yeah, it'll get done when it gets done, but that's just cast on for next to the TV. We'll knit a few rows on it occasionally, and there's no rush. So those are the two muscle burr hats that are cast on. I like feel like it's called muscle burr. I've heard people say musselberg. I've heard people say muscle burra. But I don't know. So I'm saying muscle burr, and I'm sticking to it unless someone who knows tells me otherwise. My other project is in this bag that my mom and grandma brought me back from Retrosaria when they were in Portugal in November. That was part of my Christmas gift. And it's just a pair of self-striping socks. For the life of me, I cannot figure out who dyed this yarn. I was pretty freaking sure that it was Lollipop yarns that I got in Petaluma, but I did not see this colorway anywhere. I checked if it was Mud Punch. I think the stripes are too thin. I checked Nomadic Yarns, but I don't have a record of buying it. So this is just a mystery self-striping sock that's been in my stash for a long time. I still think it might be Lollipop, and that maybe there's just not a record of the yarn. But regardless, this is what I'm doing. It's just a 2x2 rib. I am definitely a little socked out after last year, but this is something I like to keep in my bag, you know, for road, oh my god, it's not focusing. Come on, there you go. For road trips and stuff, and for knit nights. So I've been just slowly working on that. And then I did buy this skein of Moon Sisters from Farmer's Daughter. In the colorway, I think it's called Porch Pumpkin. And so there's a little stellina in it. I do really like this base because I like her colors, and then just the solid with the stellina. And so that's going to be the heels and the toes when I get to that point. So just my typical sock so that I have something to work on. And then the last one, the last knitting project is, I'm saying knitting very intentionally, is this amazing shawl from Knits About Winter. So it is it's so pretty. Basically the point of the shawl is to hold different strands of mohair kind of randomly throughout it to give you this like really pretty kind of texture. I've been eyeing this shawl for forever. I bought yarn for it at the Oregon Flock and Fiber Festival. It's a farm yarn. It's kind of ropey, but that's what I thought would be really nice and drapey for this shawl. And I think that that is coming true. And then the mohair is mostly stash with some recent acquisitions, but most of it is like stash yarn. When Tuesday Bassin decided to end their DIY section of their small business, they sold a bunch of ritual dye mohair for like half off, just I guess to make the wholesale cost back. And so I bought a bunch of that. That's what this color is, as well as this light blue color. I've had this dark blue-green Issayer in my stash for a long time. This little chunk is like also something that's just been in my stash for a long time. And then to kind of beef that up, I also bought some Hobie. It's their Diablo, so there's actually a bit of nylon in this. It's not like a silk mohair, which the rest of them are. But the color was just really good. It's a little bluer on camera than in real life. But yeah, those are the colors that I'm kind of incorporating, and it's, I'll post a photo of the shawl so you can kind of see what the finished object looks like. But yeah, I am enjoying this, but I've been working on other things and samples and stuff, so I haven't put much. Like, I think this was just one night of knitting. But once I get into this, which, like, who knows, it could be like in the fall, I think I'll kind of blast through it. So yeah, I'm just enjoying that. That was a fun one, just to think about all the colors and how they were going to come together. Yeah, okay. So now the last whip that I wanted to talk to you about is actually a crochet whip. I posted this like knit in chat video, which is like a new, another new style of video that I was trying out. It does seem like y'all liked it, so I might continue doing those sporadically. But I was working on my big ol' crochet blanket. It's very big. This is made up of all of the advent skeins that I got in my advent calendar from 2020. So yeah, quite a big project. But I think I was invigorated because I was like, oh my god, I actually knit more of this than or crocheted more of this than I had realized. I am like over halfway done with it. I've done, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I'm on the 16th color of 24. So, I mean, there's still a lot to go, but that kind of motivated me, and I did quite a few stripes since I picked it up last. I think I've done 4. I had just started this one, and I did those, and now I'm on this one. So I brought it to knit night one week just because I was like feeling it, and I worked on it in that vlog. So yeah, I'm just excited for it to eventually be done. But in the past, when I've done my other crochet blankets, they've taken me about a year, just like, you know, obviously working on them inconsistently. So it's not really a rush to get it done, but it did feel nice to get to a point where I was like, oh yeah, this is like further along than I thought, and I do enjoy working on it. So yeah, it feels good just to leave it in this like nice little basket and to pick it up occasionally and do a few rows or even just a few stitches. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that I had made some progress on this and document that, but it's gonna be really pretty, you know? It's also just like really big. I think it'll fit on a twin bed when it's done, which will be pretty cute. So yeah, in that knit in chat video that I filmed, I talked a lot about knitlit and books, and everyone seemed to really enjoy it. So I did want to just end with some books that I am reading and just recently finished and share those with you. The first one is a book that I got for Christmas called Kitchen Witch. And this is, I mean, aside from just like the beautiful cover, this is a really cool book that talks about how sort of the idea of ritual and femininity and witchcraft kind of tie into domestic labor, which is something that I feel very strongly about. And so it talks about folklores and how those like symbolism and domestic sort of like, I guess, control and power in the domestic sphere translate to like actual power and joy and ritual. I'm not doing a very good job of explaining, but I'm enjoying it a lot. So some of the different sections are talking about like chocolate and how chocolate was involved in like the domestic labor of different indigenous groups in Central and South America. It talks about coffee and how that ritual, like in the morning, you know, impacts, like, I don't know, it's just like talking about like the power in those rituals, which I find really fascinating and interesting. I'm a big proponent of radical domesticity, and so yeah, I just have been really enjoying kind of just reading this and like how they're framing all of those tasks as it's kind of like magical, but like in like a very modern witchy way. Of course, that can be flipped and used in a way that does not invoke power. But because women ended up in kitchens a lot of the time throughout history, I think there are ways in which knowing, like the knowledge of herbalism and cooking, really invoke this kind of power that was often threatening to the patriarchy, and that's why we saw a lot of like witch trials and condemnation of witches. So yeah, I'm very much enjoying that book. I'm kind of like reading it with my coffee in the mornings, and I've been enjoying that a lot. I also, in funny enough, same vein, just finished this book called Thistlefoot, which is a pretty recent publication, and it is a modern retelling of Baba Yaga. I have to say, like halfway through, I was like, oh, or like not even halfway, maybe in like the first chapter or two, I was like, I don't know where this is going. This is different than what I thought it was. But it's a really beautiful story about ancestral power and facing, not ancestors, what am I thinking? And facing generational trauma. And I fully cried at the end of it. The characters are, like the main characters are Jewish and punk and very relatable for me. And yeah, I was very touched by it, and I think I'm going to be thinking about it for a while. Yeah, if you have any like folk horror, folk tale retellings, any kind of like folk books, folk fiction, I don't even know. I'd love to hear your recommendations. Folk horror is one of my favorite genres of horror movies, so if you have any of those to recommend, I'd love to hear them. So yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. And last but not least, I just started this book called The Paragon Hotel, and I'm really enjoying that. I watched this kind of goofy History Channel special about like the underground tunnels of Portland, Oregon, because Portland as a port city in the 1800s was rife with all sorts of debauchery. Like during Prohibition era, there were like distilleries and smuggling of alcohol from all over the world. There was gambling and brothels, and basically just sounds like a lot of fun, but also a lot of hardship that comes with that kind of environment. So after watching that special, I was like, there's gotta be a good historical fiction about Portland, Oregon. This was the first thing that popped up, and I have been very pleasantly surprised. So if you want to kind of dive into Portland, Oregon history, you know, it's a historical fiction, of course, so everything with a grain of salt, but I've been thoroughly enjoying that book, and I will leave links to all of them down below in case you are curious. So that's rounding out this long ass podcast, I think. I'm really happy to have you here. I really hope you are enjoying following my kind of departure from usual podcast, I guess. I don't even know what to say. My departure from usual knitting projects. I really do kind of want to inspire folks to try something new. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But thank you for spending some time with me today. I'll talk to you very, very soon. I'd love for you to join the Tuesday live sessions that are just beginning. And all of the above. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.